G'day guys, what's cracking? It's Ralph here, and today, I'm so excited to unbox this for you. A little bit of a backstory. I phoned around and searched around everywhere to find what I'm about to unbox, and no one had any in Australia except for two at George's Cameras. And when I finally got hold of someone, one of them had gone. This is the last remaining one for quite some time. So kind of getting ahead of the crowd, but not in the first wave, if you get what I mean. So this will be, should we just open it? Should we just have a look? All right, here we go. The Nikon Zfc. Yes, this camera was based off the Nikon FM2. That was a camera back made in 1982 that had the vintage appeal. Now, one of the first cameras I ever shot on was one of these, the Pentax, the Super SE, and it's vintage looking, right, but it's also vintage acting. So Nikon thought, how about we get rid of the modern look, we go back to the vintage look, but we make it do all the cool things that a mirrorless camera can do. And that's why we're going to have a look at it today. Should we get stuck in? I thought you'd never ask. No longer factory sealed. Because I love you guys so much, if you want to be part of this channel, please subscribe if you're liking it so far. There's videos that come out on Tuesdays and Fridays, but I'm going to let you see it first. Man, that's love, right? And wow, aren't you glad you saw that first? Now look at this. This is a 16-50 on a crop sensor camera. Now that's basically a 24-70 on a full frame equivalent, except the f-stop on this is 3.5 to 6.3, but on a crop sensor you lose an f-stop. So this is the equivalent of a 4.5 or aperture of 4-ish on a full frame camera. The moment you've all been waiting for. The moment I've been waiting for, as I ducked out for half an hour today and missed the courier and then had to chase him down to the post office. Here it is. It feels light. It feels plasticky. Apparently it's like 485 grams. It's half a kilo. It's very light. It feels oh yeah, that's magnesium mold with a plastic fill. Gee, I hope it's durable. It feels like almost like a play camera, but we are going to play with it. It hasn't got a battery in it, so let's put a battery in it. See a nice little latch there. The batteries are very different from what goes in the Z6, the Z5 and the Z7. Wow. It reminds me of the Fuji cameras. I don't know if you've played with the Fuji camera, but they look very similar. All right, we've got the ISO over here. So you push that little button in and you move your ISO around. You can change between manual, aperture, shutter, P and auto, which is really handy. Over here you've got your shutter speed, which starts at 4,000, goes all the way down to 1/8 of a second, 1/4 of a second, 1/2 a second, then to 1 second, 2 second, 4 second, and then bulb. Over here I can change between movie, film and stills. That's my exposure compensation. That's for video, and that's my shutter, and I turn it on by doing this. Lovely. This is what it looks like. Face on. Very retro. That's a lens release. That's probably a function button. That would be to transform your aperture. And I think your f-stop gets shown in this little screen here, which is handy. It hasn't got a pop-up flash, but you can put a flash on it. It's got the circular eyepiece, the rubbish bin, the playback button, and the screen. All these things are standard Nikon, and this little button transfers you between the eyepiece, EVF, and the screen. Look at this. That's what I'm most excited about. Wow. That's underneath. It's got a 1/4 20" for a tripod mount, as you would expect. On the side, it's external mic, which is really handy, USB and HDMI. The card goes in next to the battery. It goes in right there. Isn't that lovely? All right, let's put a card into here. We're using Extreme Pro SD cards from SanDisk. Love these cards. And if you just shake it a bit, you have your card, it just pops out like that. This is 128 gig, which is my preferred size at the present time. Oh, it's in. Now we need to put the lens on. You get a good look at the sensor now. It's just facing down, but here's the lens, which we are just going to put in. I imagine it goes like that, like every other Nikon lens. It locks in and then you turn it, it goes out and then it comes back like this. That's how you zoom it in and then you just lock it back in. And that's the get up. So now with our lens on, we're taking the lens cap off. I'm going to turn the fully articulating screen round and put it back in so that I have a easy view of the screen. See if I can just, oh, look at that, it's on autofocus and it picked up exactly what I wanted to focus on, and my very first photo is of myself. So Nikon have made it quite clear that this camera is styled on the FM2, the Nikon FM2 that was from 1982, and the reason for this was to pay homage to their iconic history, which is nice, right? Like, it feels vintage, it feels old, and it has the intrigue and the excitement that cameras back then represented, because camera and photography was such a unique thing. It's not like everyone owned a camera. If you owned a camera, you were seriously into the trade, and so there's a sense of being connected to that, which I really, really like. So comment below if you've ever used an FM2 and what it was like, because I haven't, but I would be keen to know what it was like and how your experience was, and if you're considering getting the ZFC as a replacement for it. Basically, it's a Z50 in a vintage body with a couple of extras. They've taken the Z50 and all the mechanics and the way it works, and they've put a vintage body on it and made a couple of tweaks, and they've charged an extra $100. So let's compare the two. Let's put this against the Z50 and see what it can do and what the Z50 can do, and if there's any difference in the camera, and to help you work out which one might be best for you. This was released in July 2021. The Z50 was released in November of 2019. So that's about 20 months ago, meaning it's an older camera. The things in it have been slightly and gradually updated in the last 20 months because technology moves, as you know, at an extraordinary rate. They're both really lightweight. This comes in at 445 grams. The Z50 comes in at 450 grams. So like 5 grams difference. Now that's with the battery and with the card, and it's all ready to rock and roll. Now it feels like it's a little bit fragile, like it could crack if you dropped it. And it feels like an old camera. When I pick up an old camera, it doesn't have the weight, but it does have the feel. Now, the Z50 has the classic Z series Nikon grip, and it's so ergonomic and it's so comfy. This doesn't have it, but that's the point, right? You'd buy this camera because of how it looks and how it feels and all the dials on top, not because you want a Z series modern camera. Because if you want that, buy the Z50 and not the Zfc. Now both cameras are the same in many ways. It's a DX camera, which is a crop sensor, which is an APS-C. Now APS-C stands for Advanced Photo System Type C. Here's a little bit of a definition for you, for those of you that are really nostalgic, that takes you back to the era that this camera is trying to sit itself in. It's the same sensor. It's 20.9 megapixel. It has no IBIS, no in-body image stabilization. So if you've got the shakes, your camera, your photos are going to have the shakes. It has an ISO range between 100 and 51,200, which you would never shoot up that range because it would just be so blurry and noisy. The image processor on it is the X-Speed 6, which is the same processor that's in the Z6 and the Z7, the Z6 II and the Z7 II. However, I have learnt that not all sensors and not all processors are made equal. And what happens is the processors are created, and then the best processors and the best sensors are put into the high-end cameras, which is why the high-end cameras are released first by companies, and then they go back and say, well, this is a lesser grade processor, a less ability, and we'll use it for the ZFC, for example, or the Z50. So you can rest assured that the standard of processor that's in the ZFC will be very equivalent to what's in the Z50. It will probably be slightly better because there's been 20 months in processor and sensor development, just in tiny tweaks that will probably mean this one's ahead just by a smidge. The EVF, which is this little thing, the electronic viewfinder, has 2.36 million dots. It's really clear, it's really crisp. You won't be disappointed. As I said before, you can switch between the two using this little button. You put an SD card into it, and the SD you can use up to an UHS one, which is an ultra high speed for mainly the 4K video that you put onto this, but also the 11 frames a second it shoots at 12-bit RAW, and the 9 frames a second it shoots at 14-bit RAW. And you're like, what does bit RAW mean? I'm glad you asked. 12-bit processing means that every photo stores 4096 tonal values for each color per pixel. So 4096, that's 12-bit. But 14-bit stores 16,384 tonal values for each color per pixel. So basically you're getting better quality and better detailed image the higher bit rate you shoot on your camera. It has 209 focal points, so when you look through it and the little squares light up and go all over the place, there's 209 options you get to choose from. It always strikes me a bit weird that it's an odd number. I'm not sure why that is so, but it is so. Both these cameras have all these things that I've just talked through. They shoot 4K at 30 frames a second. The 4K is cropped, which means it's reduced in, which means the quality of 4K that you get out of this camera will not be as good as the quality of 4K that you'll get out of the Z6 or the Z7 or the Z6 Z7 II. They both take a battery called the ENEL25. It's a little bit different to all the other batteries out there, so you can't use your other Z series batteries in this. It has eye and animal eye autofocus, so you can pick up the eyes and faces on animals and people when you're shooting them, but both of those cameras do that. Let me tell you the price. The price of the Z50, if you bought it from Nikon today in US dollars, is $859.95. The price of the Nikon Zfc is $959.95. So the difference is $100. The difference between this and the Z50, even though all the things I've just talked about, both cameras do the same. So, what are you getting for your extra $100, and is it worth it? Well, that's what we're going to sort out now. And to do that, I thought we'd go out into the field and we'd look at some of the differences between these two cameras and put them through their paces, and that way you'll have enough information to decide on what you think is the best option for you if you haven't pulled the trigger on either of them yet. If you'd like to consider becoming a member of the channel, you can do it by just clicking the join downstairs and just having a look at what it means, and see there's a bit of a video there that explains it all, and see if it's for you. Because if it's for you, it's definitely for me, and that would be epic for both of us. Let's go. So we're out and about outside. I'm heading toward a spot where I like to show you some things. But the Z50 has a 3.2-inch screen, and the ZFC only has a 3-inch screen. Plus the Z50 has a pop-up flash. So those things are good, but that's about all it's got going for it over and above the ZFC. And now we're going to take a look at some of those differences. Both these cameras are weather sealed, which is great for a rubbish day like this, where it's kind of drizzling and you don't have to be too special about taking it out. But don't use it in heavy rain, and don't drop it in a puddle. That won't help you at all. The ZFC claims that it's better in autofocus in low light situations, and what I need to tell you about the autofocusing system on the Nikon Z series, it's not crash hot. We know that, we've talked about it. It's a touch better in this than it is in the Z50. Here are the specs on it, but if you're buying a camera because you think I want it to work really well in low light, do not buy a Nikon camera, buy a Sony or potentially a Canon R5. Do not go the Nikon line if you specifically want low light photography, the autofocus to be pin sharp and catch most of the time. So important factor there. So it's got it above the Z50, but it's nothing to really write home about. The other thing you can do on this camera is you can put continuous power supply, which you can't do with the Z50. So here, if you just unlatch here, which is very easy to unlatch, by the way, there's a USB-C plug, and you can plug your external power into that, so you can film or be taking a time lapse or do whatever you want based on the power pack that you've plugged in, rather than the little battery here. The little battery on both cameras says it takes 300 shots each. That's not much at all, and in my experience the amount that you use it always exceeds, but so I think they've put the minimum of 300. When you go to the Z5 and the Z6, you're looking at about 1,000, so it gives you some sort of comparison. But I would be surprised if you couldn't get more than 300 shots on a regular basis out of this camera and the battery associated with it, as you can with the Z50. But continuous power with the ZFC, don't get that on the Z50. Now, one of the showstoppers that I love about this camera is its fully articulating screen. So it means you can pull it right round, you can turn it around, and you can go into selfie mode. So let me just, I'll show you. We're going to jump from this camera to this camera. Now, what you can see in here on this is fully wide, it's 16mm cropped, and it's already the eye sensor has picked me up, which is what this the camera does on video. With the Z50, it doesn't have an auto eye detect, but it should keep me in focus as much as I spin around as it's grabbed hold of my eye. How good's that? Now I can actually vlog so much easier on this, and I'm actually loving this automatically straight away. It's the first time I've ever vlogged on it, first time I've pressed record. I'm loving this more than my M50 by a mile. The other thing is you can take a selfie with the articulating mode, but what I really like is you can frame a shot. So let's say you're out by yourself and you want to take a nice shot. You can put a timer on, you can spin the screen round, you can pose yourself, Burley Beach in the background and North Burley Hill just here, and you can take a shot, which is really, really helpful if you're out by yourself and you're wanting to use this camera to take some nice shots, some nice photos and all that kind of thing. And the eye detection is still on. Is it just, am I still in focus? Because that's really cool if I am. And I'll go to minimum focus distancing. It should lose me about here. But then sorry, it's really ugly. And it jumps to my face too. And if there's two people here, I can select whose eyes and whose face I grab hold of. Theirs, or mine, which is pretty cool, right? This is what the volume is with no external microphones attached, with the ocean just humming and rushing away in the background. This is the quality of audio you can expect from this camera if you're just pressing play. And the other thing this camera can do is shoot 1080p, so that's high def, at up to 120 frames a second, which is 25% slow motion. It's really, really slow, which is really, really cool. And it shoots 60 frames a second at 4K, so it's not going to leave you in the lurch when you want to use video. If you want a camera that shoots primary video and wonderful quality, you wouldn't go this camera. You'd go like a Z6 or a Z7, or if you're a pro, you'd wait for the Z9 to come out. But that's pretty good specs for a tiny little camera that's super light. You can just throw in your bag and take anywhere you like. One of the other advantages the ZFC has over the Z50 is its shutter speed. Now the Z50 goes up to 30 seconds and then you revert into bulb, whereas this one goes up to 900 seconds. So what does that mean? Well, there's an internal setting through the custom menu just here that you can select on, and that gives you access to all of the shutter speeds on this camera. Now you'll notice on the top dial you have access to 1 second, 2, 4, and then it goes bulb, timer. But if you actually use the back button just here, that gives you all the options. Put your camera on manual, and that gives you access for 1 second all the way through. 2, 3, look at all this. We're just going to go all the way through, 30, 60, all the way up to 900 seconds, which is 15 minutes. Now the challenge is, as soon as you move past 30 seconds, you lose your light exposure reading. And so whilst the camera can be open for that long, you don't know how to compensate. It's all just guesswork, the compensating for it on the light meter. So it's a handy little function, but it's not really a game changer, although the Z50 doesn't do it. And you can have specific long exposures up to 900 seconds, should that be something that you need. Finally, one of the significant differences, other than everything I've talked about and everything that's really obvious, is for the ZFC, you can get different panel colors. And so it's super cool, right? So you can order green or browns or greys or whites, or here's a list of what they look like, which you can just strap on the front, which personalizes this camera even more so, and also could distinguish it quite easily as yours. So when you see it, you're like, I know that's my camera, or at least it's in the vicinity of being your camera. Okay, now we're just going to pop back to the studio to wrap this puppy up. So there you go, we've come to the end of the comparison, and hopefully you've seen really clearly which options best suit you and your needs, and whether the extra that this offers is worth the $100, or you can just save your money. Now, you can probably look elsewhere and get it for way cheaper than the prices that I put on here, and I would strongly encourage you to do that. If you want a Z50, go do that now. You'll struggle to find this at a cheap price anywhere at the moment. In fact, you may struggle to pick it up at all, but you can put yourself on a waiting list and be ready to take it. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, like this, give us a thumbs up, and hang out for the next video, because I'll be doing a few more on the Nikon ZFC just to keep you plugged in and help you work through the options of this and whether it's for you. Thanks everybody. Bye. To wrap this puppy up, not a real puppy. No. Not a real puppy at all. The image processor on it, processor. No, I can't say the word properly.